In this video, we're going to look at the main features of the third of the three main strands of feminism, in this case, radical feminism. Radical feminism shares some of the features of the other two main strands, liberal and socialists, in that the vast majority of radical feminists are egalitarian, seeking equality between men and women. But radical feminists do have a very different analysis of what is the cause of female subordination or inequality. Like socialist feminists, radical feminists are revolutionary, but rather than a class revolution as advocated by socialists, radical feminists would argue the need for a sexual revolution where the roles of men and women are redefined. Despite these common features, radical feminism is very different in many respects from both liberal and socialist feminists. Radical feminists would argue that feminism is simply not compatible with any other political ideology. While the other strands accept the female disadvantage, the division between men and women, is political, radical feminists go much further than the other strands, in effect redefining what we understand by the term political or politics. Radical feminism emerged during the second wave of feminism. Radical feminists argue that the liberal and socialist analysis of the subordination and oppression of women were inadequate. They rejected the liberal approach to individual rights and equality in the public sphere, and they rejected the socialist approach based on the elimination of capitalism and social class. And radical feminists argue that gender divisions were the most fundamental of all social divisions and the root cause of female oppression. Radical feminists such as Kate Millett sought to redefine what was previously considered political. Traditional notions of politics focused on the public sphere. Millett defined politics, or redefined politics, as power-structured relationships, arrangements whereby one group of persons is controlled by another. And she sought to locate the origin of female oppression firmly within the private sphere, and it's encapsulated in the phrase, "Politics does not stop at the front door." And in particular, she sought to focus on the institution of the family. Patriarchy is at the core of a radical feminist analysis of female disadvantage. And radical feminists describe patriarchy as a process of oppression that is systematic, institutionalized, and pervasive, with the dominance of the father within the family symbolizing male supremacy in all other institutions. In her book, Sexual Politics, Millett argued that the family was patriarchy's chief institution, and that patriarchy needed to be challenged by consciousness raising among women, leading to a sexual revolution which would overthrow the traditional divisions and roles between men and women. Radical feminists were drawing on the radical or revolutionary socialist analysis of society. Socialists argued for the raising of class consciousness, which would lead to a class revolution. Radical feminists borrowed this terminology, but argue that women need to achieve consciousness raising to be aware of their subordinate position in society, and subsequent to this consciousness raising, it would lead to a sexual revolution. Other key radical texts include Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, from which the most well-known phrase pulled from that is "women are made, not born," criticizing gender divisions, and Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch, which suggested that as women have been conditioned into a passive sexual role, their more active and adventurous sides had been repressed. In effect, women had been castrated, unable to reach their full potential as women. In terms of radical feminism and the core themes, radical feminists are the most radical, and they seek to reject this idea of a public-private divide. For radical feminists, female oppression originates in the private sphere. And as such, politics does not stop at the front door. It originates in the private sphere, particularly in the family, and is then merely reproduced in the public sphere. For radical feminists, they would argue that the personal is political. Although female oppression operates in all walks of life, it originates within the family itself, patriarchy's chief institution, And radical feminists would seek to overthrow what they term the politics of everyday life, this conditioning within the family, the distribution of housework, and the politics of personal and sexual conduct. Tied in with this, the radical approach to patriarchy. Again, patriarchy is a system of political and cultural oppression whose origins lie in the structure of family and domestic life. And it is patriarchy that is the key for radical feminists, the key factor in women's oppression. It's a process of oppression that is systematic, institutionalized, and pervasive. And patriarchy is much more significant, according to radical feminists, than any other factors such as class, race, or nation. And it's patriarchy that should be overthrown as part of the sexual revolution. Like other egalitarian strands of feminism, liberal and socialist, many, but not all, as we'll see in a minute, radical feminists would subscribe to the idea of androgyny, that men and women possess both male and female characteristics, and while biological differences are facts of life, separate and different gender roles ascribed to men and women are false. Like liberal and socialist feminists, radical feminists are egalitarian, but again, because of the different analysis of female oppression, the road to equality between men and women for radical feminists is very different than that from liberal and socialist feminists. In summary, then, radical feminists, the vast majority, they reject or argue that feminism is not compatible with other ideologies. They seek to redefine the term politics. Locating politics is about power-structured relationships and focuses very much on the private sphere. And it's revolutionary, arguing that there's a need for a sexual revolution and consciousness raising among women in order to help achieve equality. However, there is a small substrand of radical feminists called essential or difference feminists who are non-egalitarian, who would argue that there are essential differences between men and women, similar to the title of the book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. These essential or difference feminists argue that there are essential differences between men and women, not just biological, but also psychological and cultural as well. They reject the egalitarian approach of other feminists. They argue that women should not try to be more like men, but should simply embrace a sisterhood or a cultural feminism. In effect, women achieve liberation through celebrating their differences, not through eliminating difference as other strands seek to do. The more extreme proponents of difference feminism argue that all men are predisposed to oppress women, and they argue for female separatism, that women should remove themselves entirely from the society of men. This is expressed in the terms political lesbianism, but also sexual lesbianism as well. In summary, radical feminism emerged as part of the second wave feminism and focuses very much on the private sphere, arguing that women's oppression and subordination originates in the patriarchal family, and this is merely reflected in the public sphere. Radical feminists are revolutionary, arguing for a sexual revolution which abolishes patriarchy and removes any distinction between male and female roles. The vast majority of radical feminists are egalitarian and seek to remove the differences between men and women. However, a substrand of radical feminism rejects the call for equality between men and women. These essential or difference feminists argue that women and men have essential differences, and women should celebrate their own essential attributes and not try to be simply like men.